I call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the August 18th, 2025 study session of your Ashland City Council. We have two agenda items on our agenda this evening, the Ashland Fiber Network Business Plan Update and the East Main Park Update. Sabrina?
All right. First up, we're going to do the Ashland Fiber Network. So Chad and Marianne are here tonight. So as a reminder, they came on June 2nd to give an update on their Next Gen Fiber pilot project. And so this is a continuation of that presentation. So tonight they're looking for guidance specifically to this biennium in terms of capital investment and then some general guidance overall for the next 4 years.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Marianne Berry, Finance Director.
Chad Sobotka, Ashland Fiber Network Operations Manager. AFN has appeared before Council 4 previous times to discuss upgrading to the next generation of broadband technology. This slide compares our current legacy DOCSIS 3.0 network with next generation technologies, all of which offer symmetrical gigabit service. We are requesting funds to implement DOCSIS 3.1 in addition to the ongoing work to deploy G.hn and PON. Each technology has its own strengths and weaknesses. Our main broadband network is now...
I'm sorry, Chad, can you pause on that? It's
Oh,
too fast for me.
sorry.
Just trying to, it's tiny print, I'm trying to read the differences.
And I will be referencing this chart in the next few slides, so I will be highlighting all of these points. Yeah. And I can also go back to the slide and answer any questions. Our main broadband network is now 25 years old and relies on a CMTS router located in our head end. With the current configuration, we can support speeds up to 250 megabits per second for downloads and 30 megabits per second for uploads. While we could purchase additional line cards to increase bandwidth capacity, this would mean investing in outdated technology. One advantage of cable modem networks is that coaxial cable is ubiquitous and serves as the primary medium for connecting buildings to the internet, enabling very fast customer installation times. All DOCSIS systems, including 3.1 and the upcoming 4.0, still rely on active devices, which in this slide are represented by the node, mini bridger, and line extender. We propose upgrading half of the legacy nodes to the latest generation DOCSIS 3.1. This enhancement will enable the delivery of fiber-like speeds of 1 gigabit per second for both download and upload. The upgrade necessitates replacing the existing 25-year-old active devices with new, state-of-the-art equipment. Furthermore, the new system provides real-time telemetry capabilities, significantly improving our ability to quickly identify and resolve node issues. Customer installation times will remain efficient as the technology continues to utilize existing coaxial cable infrastructure. We have currently deployed a dozen positron G.hn GAM units, primarily in dense urban environments such as the Ashlander apartments and in historic buildings where additional construction is not feasible. Fiber is run to the building and uses the existing coaxial cable infrastructure to connect customers. As shown in the diagram, this architecture is significantly simpler than DOCSIS networks, resulting in greater reliability. Installation remains fast due to the use of coaxial cables. For instance, we were able to convert an entire city block within 4 hours, limiting customer downtime to under 20 minutes. Finally, we have passive optical network, or PON, which represents our ultimate goal. Since it relies solely on light transmission, PON experiences very few operational issues and can be easily upgraded to support higher speeds. Currently, we offer speeds of up to 2.5 gigabits per second, making it the fastest internet service available to our residential customers. However, customer installation require significantly more time because fiber must be run directly to each building, often involving drilling new entry points. This process is also considerably more expensive, and upgrading our entire network to PON will take years rather than months, as with DOCSIS 3.1. Nonetheless, we plan to continue investing in PON as we upgrade our cable infrastructure with the intention of deploying both technologies during the upcoming biennium. Oh, yeah. Do you have any other questions about this slide and the technologies?
Not yet.
So essentially, when we were reviewing the business plan back in February, March of this year, Chad and I were looking at what the capital outlay would be for AFN, and realizing that PON was going to, the next stage of PON, passive optical network, was going to require a lot more capital intensive investment, and we wouldn't be able to realize that anytime soon. So in the council packet, we summarized that as being approximately, if we were to do it and focus on it, it would be approximately 15 million over the course of 2 years. Even if that were to happen, the ability for AFN to be able to focus on that would require a lot of logistical and reworking in their plant, and then also in with staffing. So one of the things that we had talked about in reviewing how to deploy this high-speed program to the rest of Ashland was being able to work with DOCSIS 3.1, which is the next generation technology for gigabit high-speed internet. And because of the times to deploy that, we would be able to provide that to most of Ashland faster. And in doing so, also work within the budget of AFN over the course of the 2-3 bienniums. So the request to be able to do this biennium was originally 2.44 million, still is. But what we came to understand is that we can't, at this point, since the budget has already been adopted, we can't appropriate unappropriated ending fund balance. In discussing this with staff last week, when we were reviewing the potential budget supplemental. So the thought is that 2.4 million is the capital plan for this biennium. And then if you flip over to the next slide, this is the general forecast, which again is somewhat fluid, depending on where revenues come in, where expenditures come in. But the capital plan for the next 3 bienniums is anywhere from 4.8 to 5.5, 5.8 million, and it's incorporating deploying DOCSIS 3.1 in addition to PON. And in doing so, we'll be able to, at the end of this period, capture about 90% of Ashland with gigabit high-speed internet, while also deploying PON, all within the cash flow of AFN. So not needing to go out for debt or any other resources outside of what it can generate on its own through the deployment of DOCSIS 3.1. So back to the capital plan again, Chad, please, thank you. So the capital plan for this biennium requires 3.1 DOCSIS upgrade of 1.75 million. It also in tandem, is also going to continue to expand through PON, and then the cable modems and the bucket truck is also part of that expansion program. In order to push the communication on the fact that now gigabit high-speed internet is available in these new areas. There will be a marketing program that's targeted specifically to let people know that these new areas have gigabit high-speed internet. I think from the financial perspective, now, since we can't appropriate any fund balance, the potential of coming from contingency is one option. And then if there still is the need for additional capital, Chad's going to need to work with his M&S and personnel budget, and if necessary, pull from there if that is where the expenditures lie. If, as an example, and Chad feels very confident that the revenue projections are really conservative in our model. If, for example, we do start to see revenue beyond our budget, we can also appropriate that mid-biennium as well. And then going back to that, yep, it's kind of hard to see, but I have to look at mine because I can't see that one up there, but we're projecting that, well, right now we have a 34% market share. By the end of 2033, we're projecting at a conservative projection of a target of 55 to 60% market share with a 90% coverage of Ashland with gigabit high-speed internet. That entails continuing to expand DOCSIS 3.1 and PON in the next 7 years, or 5 years, 5 to 7 years, and spending approximately $4.8 to $5.8 million. And with that, oh, actually, one more slide. Just a summary of Ashland Fiber Network. I don't know if you want to pick this one up or... Okay, just that the services that we provide as a municipal broadband utility is utilitarian, and that is that we support city government through our franchise fees and providing internet service, or, well, internet service, of course, but IT and other network expertise to all our departments. We also provide reliable and affordable internet access to not only our residents and businesses, but also to certain public spaces as well, and assistance programs that wouldn't normally be available to our residents. Finally, economic development goals can be incorporated into this AFN model in that we're supporting remote work offices at a high speed, while also providing low-cost service to residents and businesses, and also those future commerce districts. And finally, we support APD and fire through AFN's work. And with that,
Questions?
Yes, please.
Councillor Dale.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate this. So I appreciate the tech, Chad, as always. My question to you is, so you're over the next 1, 2, 3, we'll call it 3 biennia, that you'll eventually get all PON and up to 2.5 gig. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes. Our target is to have, by 2033, an even split 50% PON and 50% DOCSIS 3.1.
Okay.
Yeah. And our goal by 2033 is 90% of Ashland will have access to gigabit.
so essentially, the thought is push DOCSIS 3.1 this biennium, bring in customers, give them high-speed internet. They'll already be customers, and then as the 2028, start to flip the capital expansion to be more PON specific. Yeah.
Right, we're going to have a real heavy push on DOCSIS 3.1 over the next couple of years, and then that will slowly taper off, and PON will start to accelerate more.
Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you. Mayor, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm still, I know we talked about this last time, and I get that. I still feel like this is very heavy residential. I'm curious, I don't see anything relative to the business plan that looks more into, I mean, people are installing 10 gig within the next year, and it will be 100 gig past then. I mean, if we're still at 2.5 in 2033, that will be like trying to sell a 28K dial-up relative to our competitors. So is there any way that we can dig in more to what our business case is relative to commercial and enterprise, the things that we can offer there, where our fiber footprint is relative to that? Because that's really, I think, where the value is going to come from this long-term investment. To be quite honest with you, I'm a little thin on the business case. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all that you did, but this to me is kind of a network upgrade to just catch up to normal, is what this looks like to me.
Right, absolutely. And, we're still focusing on the downtown corridor. We've nearly lit up every single block, and we provide gigabit speed, symmetrical speed to every city block, nearly every city block. And it's also important to remember that according to GIS data, only about 10% of the electric meters are for commercial units, and 90% of Ashland is residential. So we're still focusing a lot on commercial and business. Like we've got the Washington Street project. We're still focusing on Ashland Street and the downtown corridor and on Hersey Street. But we also have to pay attention to our bread and butter, because we've got 90% of Ashland who really wants to go with AFN. They love our support. They love our field techs, but we just don't have the speed. Yeah.
I will also mention, too, that the cost differential to a business versus a neighborhood or just a particular residential customer is not, there is no cost differential, essentially.
Right.
So, the density of providing to residences is going to be more impactful from a cash flow perspective. They're going to be able to bring in, AFN's going to be able to bring in more revenue and market share through targeting that residential base just from the effort of providing it to them.
And we're also looking to deploy new technology. A company called Harmonic, who we're purchasing the DOCSIS 3.1 upgrade equipment through, they make these mini OLT nodes, and we'll be deploying our first one. It's already on order. It's in the lab. It's being tested. We'll be deploying our first one in mid-September in the Clear Creek neighborhood. So that's a mix of residential and commercial. And so based upon that test, we will be spot deploying these in other areas, like the Hersey Street Business Park, which is right around the corner.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Bloom?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and the work that you're doing on this. So kind of digging in a little bit, I mean, absolutely, this is a question of economic development and business, especially light industry, is something that we really want to tap into. On the residential side, are we prioritizing new development? So when a new apartment complex comes in, a new housing development comes in, that we're hitting them right away, making sure we're getting a jump on that, rather than kind of waiting for whatever older infrastructure is being put in and then coming in on the back end.
Correct, and we're doing that where possible. So the Caldera Oaks is the brand new housing development going in on Lower Clay Street. That's going to be 100% PON. Midtown Lofts, 100% PON. We have just over 50% of the market share on Midtown Lofts as well. And once again, that's through our strong partnerships with the developers and our customer support. And also, the Beach Creek subdivision is the first 100% fiber optic housing development.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate, I mean, I think that your objectives in terms of market share and what you're hoping to capture are very hopeful and grand. And for me personally, that's the kind of aggressive thinking I like to see out of an enterprise like this. So thank you.
Councillor Duquesne?
Thank you for the presentation. And Chad, thanks for getting back to me. I appreciate that. Coming forward, something that you didn't mention is that you also are at SOU. Is that correct?
Yes, we do provide the SOU fiber, and we provide the backbone for Link Oregon. So the SOU's internet connection traverses our fiber, which connects us to Link Oregon and LS networks.
Yes, thank you. And just quickly, looking at the funds, I think, Marion, you might have mentioned that the funding is going to come from the ending fund balance of the fiber net, AFN, is that correct, Chad? Marion?
Yes, so to clarify what Chad was saying earlier, overall, yes, across the bienniums. This biennium, however, his need is 2.4 million. He's already got 1 point,
I thought 1.6.
it's 1 point, it's on
Yeah,
there. 1.6,
yeah.
yes, already. So working with that number first, and then seeing how that moves through the biennium. If he thinks that he'll need more, there's the contingency draw, and he'll work with his M&S and personnel budget. But going forward, the capital expansion plan could be done all within his ending fund balance.
Yeah. Thank
Not
you.
your ending fund balance, but.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both for that clarity. And so for new customers, they are where they are. And something that was mentioned earlier from my colleague is that, and then all of the new construction that you mentioned, their rates would possibly go up. Is that correct?
In the future.
In the future.
Yes, for the next biennium, we will be considering a rate increase. But historically, as I mentioned in my email, current customers are locked in at the current rate.
Thank you.
Councilor Hanson?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you both for this presentation. Excuse me. I'm curious, last time we met, we talked a bit about marketing and staffing, and I see there's some numbers in here for the FTEs. I don't see anything in here for marketing. I'm just curious if you have just an update, really. How much further down the road are you with your marketing partner that you were investigating last time we talked?
Right, and so the RFQ for our marketing, for the rebranding and target marketing, that's already been written. Really, it's the outcome of when the council votes in September for this. That's going to be the date when we release this, the RFQ for the marketing. Because we want to make sure that we do have the funds to adequately deploy DOCSIS 3.1. But we do have 70,000 earmarked for the rebranding and target marketing. And we also have additional funds in both years of this biennium. I believe we have about
140,000 for the biennium.
Right. Exactly. So we have an additional 140,000 for additional marketing as well, in addition to the 70,000 we'll be spending through the capital spending here.
Okay, great. And then on the staffing side, it looks like you add full-time employees. The end of this biennium, like when you really get going, you add another half and then another one, and then yet another couple in the further 27-29 biennium. Is there anything else that's not baked in here, like more trucks, materials, or anything like that?
We are asking for a third bucket truck, and that's also including the maintenance of that bucket truck. But I believe that our real need will be staff to answer phones. We are already seeing our call volume increasing as we continue to add more customers. We keep hitting all-time highs with our customer count. We just brought on 0.5 FTE today, and so he'll be starting, which will help alleviate the stress.
Okay. And also, zooming out, I don't know if it's relevant or important, but I noticed that our ending fund balances on the packet document were very different from the document up here, to the tune of, I don't know, like $900,000 or so.
I can speak to that. Ooh, hello.
Yeah, could you help us understand what's going on
So
there?
originally, when we were planning on appropriating approximately $727,000, which was the differential between what we've already got in our capital line through the adopted budget. However, when working on that budget supplemental last week, it was determined that we can't appropriate unappropriated ending fund balance per
Oh,
public
that's what you
budget law.
mentioned at the beginning.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you,
So
Marianne.
that's how we adjusted it.
Okay. And that happens in the 25, 27, that's totally.
Correct. And then if this is, the general plan that you as a body would agree upon, then going forward in the next biennium, we'll adjust our capital numbers accordingly so that they're appropriated at the time of budget and we're not coming back.
And,
like this.
And to the folks that aren't looking in the packet and maybe don't see this on the screen, this is a profitable business plan that will be a revenue generator as well as service provider for the citizens and businesses of Ashland.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Sherrill?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And you guys offer amazing service. I've had the pleasure of working with your field crews, your phone center. We have lots of service with you. And I just have a couple questions about the competition. If we have about a 34% market share now, and we go head to head with our two main competitors in town on 70 units at Midtown Loft, and we only hit 50% of the market with the very best, are we like throwing bad money after good if we're investing in like DOCSIS 3.1 when our two other main competitors are running fiber every day up and down the street? When I'm out there running around, I see those folks, and like, do we have a relationship with our competitors? Do you know who's capturing most of the market share and why? And to follow that up, like, is there a chance that we can't keep up with the private sector?
One of the benefits of, I'll answer your last question first. One of the benefits of DOCSIS 3.1 is the fact that we will be able to deploy and connect customers so quickly because our field techs really specialize in coax installations. And so we'll be able to turn and burn on those connects. And I will also point out that Midtown Lofts is only partially filled. And so right now we feel pretty happy with an above 50% market share because that is our end result. Our goal is to hit at least 55% market share by 2033. So we feel that we're on track with that. And
Can I also add to that too, not to interrupt, but and that is without no marketing. They're just picking up 50% with zero marketing. And I think that once that ramps up, it does have to be thoughtful because we have to think about, our billing person in the back and the phone calls and whatnot. But I do think that once we start with the targeted marketing, that's going to really you will realize higher numbers.
And also in respect to Midtown Lofts, that 55% market share or above 50% that we currently have, the competition that we're facing in Midtown Lofts, they have already pre-installed all of their equipment. And so they make it incredibly easy for customers to sign up for service. And so even despite that, we are still capturing more market share in that because of a relationship with the developer and a relationship with the customer. And we're also reaching out to realtors and figuring out how we can tap into help realtors sell homes by identifying homes that are going to be in the DOCSIS 3.1 area. So I've already reached out to a few realtors with that. So we do have ideas for how to go after aggressively marketing.
Thank you.
Councillor Kaplan?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Chad and Marianne. A lot's been said so far, already. So, got a couple more questions. I just want to clarify, confirm that I think somebody said that Councilor Bloom, I think, said that this is a profitable enterprise that's providing service, and it has zero debt, is what I understand as well. So there's no debt whatsoever from the telecommunications fund.
Absolutely, we are very happy about that.
So the ending fund balance is not, or the fund balance is not actually being appropriated for debt at all. The contingency, can you go back to that other slide that talks about where the money's coming from? The contingency, 163,844. Last year's contingency was about 175,000. I couldn't find the contingency for the fund for this biennium. Would that wipe out the contingency for the telecommunications fund for 25, 27?
The 163?
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
So that would zero it out.
Mm-hmm. Which is why the recommendation is to just, do a mid-biennium refresh for AFN, see where they are in their M&S and their personnel. There might be some savings there
Right.
if they need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just understanding the mechanics of all of this, this is a presentation to a study session for us. There's no real ask at this point. You have, an appropriation, a capital appropriation of what is it? 1.6 million dollars. You're identifying spending. Some of those things you won't be able to do until you get additional funds, but that's going to happen sometime later in the biennium. And it depends a little bit on the rate of acquisition of new customers, because as more income comes in, you'll be able to, fund more. You could use that money,
Yeah.
right? And your actual rate of spending. In the last biennium, your rate of spending was much slower than projected.
Right.
Because for a lot of reasons, I'm not criticizing, just saying, observing. Of those capital spending items, you've got the big number is almost $1.8 million for DOCSIS 3.1. Is there a lumpy purchase? What is? Can I imagine what you're actually doing with this? So you have to buy a whole bunch of stuff and put it in a warehouse, or do you buy it, kind of as you go along?
We will be issuing a request for proposal to upgrade roughly half of our DOCSIS 3.0 nodes. So there will be physical components that we will be purchasing, and we will also bring in an outside consultant that's all they do day in and day out is upgrading these legacy 3.0 plants to 3.1. This 1.75 million, this is also inflated. These numbers were generated towards the beginning of the year. We still don't know what's going to happen with the tariffs. Nobody knows. My supplier says that prices are still going to remain low. So I feel like this is a conservative estimate, and we should not need the entire amount, but it's there just in case something crazy happens.
Okay. So then the bucket truck, when are you planning to acquire that?
I'm also playing that by ear. I want to allocate the money for that, but I want to see if our techs really need it. Is this a need or is this a want? I don't want to go out and just spend money just because we have it. I want to be very conservative with our spending.
Mm-hmm. That seems appropriate. So, okay, so it sounds like this is a status report for us, asking if we're interested in you continuing to, install DOCSIS 3.1 PON in certain places where it makes sense. And as we go on through the biennium, you'll come back to us if you've actually succeeded in installing a whole bunch of that stuff,
Right.
And you'll have better numbers at that point of what your actual customer count is. That's right?
Absolutely, yes.
And then at that point, we can decide whether there's additional resources that need to be appropriated, including the contingency.
Yeah, I think essentially it is checking your overall pulse on the strategy of this hybrid expansion program of DOCSIS 3.1 and PON during this timeframe.
And thanks, Marianne. And then just a reality check. I think you've said that the customer count has been going up month by month and year by year over the last few years anyway, not necessarily earlier. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Right. So you expect that to continue to happen, and especially as you do more of the marketing that you've talked about, that should increase and then bring in more revenue to be able to apply to more installation.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So following on Councillor Kaplan's questions, just checking that I understand this as we're kind of pulling a lot of the different pieces together. So the capital spending elements that you have here have been adjusted for potential tariffs. And so we think depending on how those play out, there may be some cost savings there. When you're looking at the two elements where you're requesting additional funding, the order would be to work with the M&S transfer line first and then come back to us if a contingency draw is needed. Is that correct?
Well, ideally, perhaps. However, I don't know what it would look like mid-biennium. So, it would really take, we would just need to see where we are mid-biennium to see where AFN's personnel and M&S is. So ideally, M&S, personnel, those lines, and then contingency, yes.
And can you go back to the other spreadsheet? The first column of numbers that has the market shares has 12.5, and then we see 33% and 45% next to personnel costs and material and services. Can you explain what that column is?
Under 20, biennium 23-25, and then it has year one.
No, it's right next to the
12,500 represents the total number of serviceable addresses in Ashland.
Okay, so I'm looking, there's a column after the first narrative column, and it says market share, and it goes across, and it says 12,500.
Yes.
But there is no column title in front of that. And then a little bit further down, there's a 33% next to personnel costs and a 45% next to materials and services.
Oh,
I'm wondering
yes.
what
Okay.
that column is.
They're percentage assumptions. So the 12,500 was just indicative of, as Chad said, the total number of meters that are out there that we potentially are basing the market share off of. So we're just plugging into that 12,500 to determine what market share is. Going down to personnel costs, historically, we were around that 33% range. So I put that in there just as an indicator of where personnel would normally fall under 33% of total expenditures, 33% of revenues. However, in biennium 23-25, those are actual numbers, so they're not going to necessarily equate to 33%. Biennium 25-27 is the actual adopted budget. So I can't remember off the top of my head if that's around 33%, but I would say it should be. And then the materials and services, that was just an indicator of where historically we have been for M&S. But yeah.
From the total of the expenditures. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Councillor Bloom.
Thank you. This is something that popped into my mind that Councillor Kaplan brought up about the bucket truck. I seem to remember just several weeks ago, we had a bucket truck that we were looking to auction off. Why can't we repurpose that? It seems like a more cost-effective way. I mean, I know we stay on top of our vehicles, and it seems like that might be a more financially responsible decision, unless we've already auctioned it off.
I did ask that question, and I was told that was way too big for AFN, or something to the effect that it wouldn't be useful for
Okay.
them. So it wasn't apples to apples bucket trucks.
Right, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Not that I
Councillor
know
Dan.
my bucket
Thank you,
trucks,
Mayor.
but-
And just to repeat, this is not the slide that was in the packet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So looking at this, and I'm just kind of going across revenue expenses, which year is it net positive?
Well, looking at the ending fund balance, we're
No,
net positive.
I'm looking at, I know we're net positive with the ending fund balance, meaning it's not negative, I think, Marion, but I'm looking at the revenue line, and I'm looking at the total expenses line, and I'm looking at basically the net, I don't want to use the word profit, but like in 2033, we've got a net revenue estimated of 5.1 and a net expenditure of 5.2 in 2033.
Yeah, you would have to take the capital lines out in order to see what the net position is from operations. So,
So I understand you're
taking-
capitalizing all that, right, Marion?
correct, what's that?
You're capitalizing it is what you're doing in order to make it.
This project is the capital plan. So when we're saying it's a net positive, I would refer to it as a net operational positive. So revenue is covering, operational revenue is covering operational expenses. What we're suggesting is over time to use the ending fund balance to fund the capitalization of the fiber project.
So the numbers in blue will also change over time.
Right.
So you can see in the first year of biennium 27-28, we're asking for potentially 1 million for the capital outlay proposed. That number might be closer to 600,000. And same with the preceding year or the next years, the following years, that 800,000 might be lower. So we are cash flow positive if you omit the capital outlay proposed.
One more, that's okay. And remind me again, I'm sorry, I may have just been thinking about something else, Chad, but what, relative to the market share and your average rate, your assumptions spread out over the next 6 years, let's say 3 biennia, what were your assumptions based off what, how did you come up with those again?
It really was based upon the SOU area, where we also faced really stiff competition from a lot of other providers. There were 3 providers offering gigabit service. And in that SOU area, just with word of mouth alone, our customer count increased over 12% during our pond pilot project. So we feel that with targeted marketing and offering gigabit service to over 60% of Ashland, we can really obtain those customer numbers.
Councilor Hanson.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying the net positive position. That's something I'm still working through in my head. But in the interim, I'm curious if you can, Chad, we went through a period of catch-up where I believe our initial investment was $1 million for the pilot project. And I'm curious what we learned before then, during then, and then to put into this model to Councilor Dale's question of, looking down to 2033, we're going to be in a different era, different speeds, different technology. What can we do differently? I don't know if there's any numbers in here to support it, so we're not caught flat-footed and we need another $1 million investment 4 or 5 years from now when technology changes. What have we learned? What are we going to do different?
Well, luckily with the pond technology that we're deploying, the upgrade path is a lot easier. So our existing pond network is the XGS pond. Very soon they'll be releasing 50 gig pond, and they make coexistence modules so we can run both flavors of this pond at the same time. So upgrade path is going to be a lot better with the pond technology moving forward. And lessons learned, we really needed the field staff. So right now we have 4 field staff, and having 4 field staff really makes a difference. We're able to complete construction projects a lot faster. That's why we have so many construction projects going at once. And it's also the fact that, hey, AFN, we can do this. We are small, but we are mighty. We faced stiff competition, and yet we persevered, and we did a great job. We are aware that we're going to need to bring on staff because you can't hit 55% market share without adding customer support. And so a lot of lessons learned that we're applying to this plan. And that's also why we've chosen with this DOCSIS 3.1, because we get the biggest bang for our buck. Within 6 months, we'll be able to offer gigabit to 60% of Ashland. We just cannot do that with PON.
And as I understand it, the pond is fiber everywhere. So
Correct.
Upgrading to the next technology and the new speed will all be on that new infrastructure for the new construction.
Correct.
That you're rolling out. And everybody else that's upgraded to this 3.1, we're going to be stuck with coax, and we'll figure out what we're doing if we want to get that next upgrade 10 years from now.
The important item to also remember is the DOCSIS 3.1 nodes that we will be purchasing have a PON module. So Harmonic specializes in PON. And so we will be able to deploy DOCSIS 3.1 and PON all from the same node.
Okay. I think I get that. Thanks.
Councilor Kaplan.
Thanks, Mayor. Just another clarifying question, I think. You've stated 2 goals for the period. One goal is 90% coverage, and that really just depends upon how quickly, successfully you can put in the technology, the nodes, and do all of that. That's really just a capacity question. The other goal, though, is 55% coverage with gigabyte coverage.
90% of Ashland will have access. Our goal is 90% of Ashland will have access to gigabit with 55% market share.
actually
Revenues coming in.
signing up. Exactly.
Correct.
Okay. So I want to try to break those apart a little bit, because it seems to me the 90% goal, you know, we're talking about spending money. We've got a path to find the money for you to do that. How are we to think about the trend if in fact you're not able to get the market share? If you're at 35% now, you hope to get to 37% by the end of this fiscal year, 40% by the end of the biennium. What if we're only at 36% by the end of the biennium? How are you going to think about that? And I want to break that in two pieces. One is that's an overall number, because you're not differentiating between residential and business there. Mm-hmm. Should we be thinking differently about residential versus business? Should we have should we have a separate goal? Do we think differently if we have a higher market share of residential and a lower market share of business, or vice versa? Why should we be agnostic between those two, I guess is my question.
We are just beginning to break apart our nodes, thanks to our GIS department. So we have estimated number of commercial and residential addresses per every single one of our for every single one of our nodes. And so we're just beginning to analyze that data, and that will also be part of the marketing consultants that we hire. They're going to help us to determine how to best reach, what our best path forward is to reach that 55% market share. And it's also important to know that we're not doing this alone. AFN is not its own island. We have partnered up with a lot of other municipal-owned and operated fiber networks all throughout the Oregon and Washington. So we have an address group going. We can bounce ideas off of them. I went up to Portland recently and met with the city of Hillsborough, where we discussed how we can market together, how they can have access to our fiber customers and how we can have access to theirs. So for example, Shakespeare is one of our customers, and maybe we can do cross promotion between Shakespeare and the city of Hillsborough. And so we have a lot of different marketing ideas that we're throwing around in our little group.
Okay. I guess I'm not quite clear on how I'm supposed to think about it when we come back to the question, if you've spent the money fast, because I think you will be able to spend it. And then when we come review whether to allocate the contingency or not, if you've only hit 36%, how am I supposed to think about that? I
think, if I can add, I think it will be a review and an assessment at that point in time. I do believe that marketing is going to be key. If you just look at 23-25, when the pilot program had started, we increased by 240 customers. And when you look at the last decade, it was, drip by drip by drip increases until you got to the recent, the more recent 2000s. And so I think, and once this starts to deploy on a greater level with a market push, which is something that these guys have not been doing at all, to gain 250 within a biennium that we weren't even doing in the last several years is something to be said. So if we were to focus on marketing and rebranding and this target push, I think that it will have the data for all of you to look at and determine next steps. But Chad feels pretty solid that these are conservative numbers. We initially put this forecast together based on some conservative numbers. So.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of this next step, which is we're going to take some of these steps in terms of this deployment of this newer technology, that's all happening, just to be clear for the people who are watching, that's all happening within the funds that are already in this operation. So when we think of this as an enterprise fund, What we're not talking about is we're not talking about general fund contingency. We're not talking about borrowing money. We're not talking about all of those elements. We're talking about moving money within the existing allocations, the money that has already been appropriated to this program. Now, there may be some things that happen later, and I think that's why you speak to that check-in, right?
Yes.
We get down the road, we take a look, we see what's happening with new customers, how fast is the deployment going, how is that looking, is it working the way we are assuming it's going to work? So what you're looking for us from this council tonight is, does this look good enough and solid enough to move forward with these next steps? Because we can't make a formal determination at this meeting. We can't make any decisions. So you're looking for a general head nod that says, yes, go forward, and then come back to us mid-budget and let us know how it's going. And at that point, we're open to potentially reappropriating some of this money or dipping into the contingency fund for this particular fund. Is
Yes,
that correct?
and also said in a different way, when Jason Wagner, before me, IT director, previously came before you, this was a PON pilot program. Now this is a hybrid DOCSIS 3.1 PON expansion program going through 3 bienniums. So that is what we're putting in front of you to give us guidance on. That we've already got 1.6 plus million that's appropriated, but we'd like to not, it's going to take 15 million to do PON over the course of 2 years if that's all we did. And strategically, it just would not bear for how AFN is set up today. So what we came up with was this hybrid, and frankly, in all the research that I've done, that's what the others are doing as well, because from a capitalization standpoint, that is what makes sense, is to have this step technology. So exactly what you said, but going from the thinking of total PON domination to DOCSIS 3.1 to PON in the course of these 6 years.
Great. Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, I'll just kind of, I guess, say my last little piece. And I think this is great. And to use maybe kind of a corny analogy here is that the way I look at this is this is an investment in infrastructure, and critically one that I think government is set up to do. I look at this similar to the interstate system, right? In the late 40s and 50s, the federal government invested massively in our interstate system, and the economic development benefits of that, I mean, we are still greatly seen today. And I think that, high-speed internet is the future interstate system for our economy. And if we're serious about recruiting businesses and young families that work from home, being able to offer this is important. And I think that this is exactly what government is set up to do. So yes, I support this plan.
Councilor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Just backing up on the pilot project, how far are we on that, or how much work do we have left to do on that, number one? And number two is relative to this, when do you need to know by? And the only reason I'm asking that is because I appreciate this, I do. I'm still, I live and breathe this too, like you do, and I'll be honest with you, I'm still a bit skeptical of these numbers, the aggressiveness of it. There's lack of volatility. It kind of fits together too nicely to me, just how I know the market is, and with the technology and how it's changing. Is there any way, or we've got a pretty healthy fund balance, is there any mechanism in which we could take the time, and we spend time really shoring up and having multiple sets of eyes, external and internal, on other projects that we do across the city? I would feel much more comfortable to really just have these numbers pressure tested and looked at, just to make sure, because if you're off by 5%, that's a $750,000 delta. I mean, there goes 25% of your ending fund balance if we miss this mark by 4 to 5% in a market share. So, and that's on a good day. So that's all I appreciate it, and I absolutely know what we're trying to do, and I completely understand what Councilor Bloom is saying and others. I just, to be honest with you, don't quite. I have a knot in my stomach about saying yes to this quite yet. Not for a lack of the effort in what we're trying to do, because I full faith in that and the team, but just need to make sure these numbers are correct. Is there anything you could recommend that you would need in a timeline to be able to really just have a second set of eyes on these externally?
Well, to answer your first question, where are we today? So we've successfully deployed PON to 2 neighborhoods. So we've deployed it to 2 nodes, and we're planning the next 2 nodes. That will hopefully begin construction early in 2026. So we're kind of waiting to see the timeline for this DOCSIS 3.1 project before we take on really any massive PON projects. We're still deploying it to small spot areas, like I mentioned, the Clear Creek. And as far as pressure testing the numbers, we're really looking at other municipalities, looking at their market share, looking at their competition. And so partly that's what our numbers are based off of, is what are other networks our size, what is their market share, how many staff do they have? And we're really in an arms race. We're 3 months already behind. And so I was hoping to have DOCSIS 3.1 deployed easily by the end of the year, but now we're probably creeping closer towards January, February. So the longer we wait, the more time Quantum Fiber and other providers will be able to dig in and take our market share. We still have a leg up on Charter, on Spectrum. They're deploying DOCSIS 3.1 mid-split. We're deploying DOCSIS 3.1 high-split. That's what allows us to offer gigabit symmetrical. So we will be able to do things that the competition can't. So really, time is of the essence. We want to make sure that we're completely open and transparent and let council know what our plans are and what our contingencies are. But at the same time, we do have a sense of urgency.
I will also just provide that from the money that was allocated, originally it was $1 million, $662,000 has been expended last biennium, 21, 23, 23, 25, 23, 25. And from that, again, not to belabor it, but we increased by 250 customers, give or take. And so I think the question is, we moved that 300,000 into this new number of 1.649 that got reallocated as the capital amount in 25-27. So the question then is for this body is to guide AFN as to how to spend that 1.649 or the 2.4 million in total for the hybrid plan. Because the 1.6 is appropriated now. And as Chad said, he's been kind of sitting on it since we've first talked about this hybrid strategy back in February. So.
Councilor Duquesne.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, you both answered a big portion of my question, and the mayor was looking for a head nod. Well, this is my head nod, yes. I do believe this is the way to go. I appreciate being conservative and looking at where we are, holding on to the money and looking to measure the pilot program and how that's going and not being progressive in steps. So I like the direction that we're going in. I look forward to when marketing is put in place. I'm sure that'll take it off. So this is my head nod. Yes.
So I want to make sure that I understand our 3 pathways. So one pathway is to just keep the infrastructure we have, which we know is outdated, and we will be eventually left behind, and maybe not in the too distant future, right? Pretty quickly left behind. On the far other side is the PON technology, which is extremely expensive, and we would have to go into debt in order to move down that pathway. Significant debt, it seems like. So that seems like a very risky pathway. They both seem very risky. So do I understand what we're looking at here is with this hybrid process that we are staying within our existing resources and taking a step towards it, a pretty aggressive step because we're in a market. And then we will see how that goes and we will make adjustments as we move. Am I understanding those three elements correctly?
That is correct.
Okay, great, thank you. So we do want to move on to our next topic soon. So if there are no further questions, what we need to do is go around. We've heard from a couple of counselors, but I'd like to still hear from each person in this round. And then the question is, in terms of guidance back to staff, is council supportive of this hybrid approach? And is council acknowledging that this hybrid approach may very well require a budget supplemental in the future to move funding around inside the fund? That's what you need?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay, so who would like to start? Councilor Hanson?
Yeah, I'm in full support of this for so many reasons for our community up and down the chain. It's all been discussed really, really well here tonight. And based on your experience this past 2 years, you have set high expectations and exceeded them. So I'm on board with this. I don't have any more insights into these numbers to be able to drill in any deeper. Certainly would like to if that comes up, but as is, I totally support it. Thanks.
Councilor Kaplan?
Yeah, I'm supportive as well. I think it's kind of a middle ground. I appreciate backing off of the PON, 100% PON, which was kind of the idea with the pilot. I think that you've demonstrated that that's probably unworkable. I'm a little bit agnostic about the future of the enterprise, but I think we've got enough to really continue on going on and seeing how that works out, how your rollout is, and how your customer acquisition is over the next year before we have to take a decision. So thanks.
Councilor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I appreciate the sitting there for a while under fire from me. I'm tentatively supportive of this. I appreciate, as the mayor said, that kind of down the middle, we have the funding balance we have the fund. It is not, it's just moving money around internally within that fund. It's not asking to pull from someone somewhere else. So we're not asking our citizens to say, what is the trade-off by doing this? And I appreciate that. And money sitting in that ending fund balance doing nothing is not serving our citizens. So I appreciate that. Now, if this were a business meeting, I would vote no right now because I don't have enough information, not because of anything there. But given this is a study session and looking for direction, I would give this as a qualifying support, as in the relatively near future, we'll have additional talks and we can look at what our metrics are, what are our benchmarks as we move forward and make sure that we are meeting these things. Because what I don't want to do is say yes, and then we turn around and it's 5 years later and we just missed the mark and weren't paying attention because we were heads down building a hybrid network. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And I think just to be clear in terms of this direction, that there is an expectation that we'll receive a mid-biennial budget update that has those metrics. Councilor Sherrill.
Yeah, I just wanted to say again that your service is amazing. I want to support this. I am worried that if it's faster and it's cheaper and it's easy to install and we can run cable real quick, none of that really matters if it doesn't work. And when I get people calling me that say I can't Zoom, I need to change providers, or when stuff doesn't work, I think the market will, the market's very aggressive, and I'm a little bit concerned that we're already behind. When we get behind in tech, it's like almost impossible to catch up. I would be more willing to look at how do we get more money to do it right the first time, but I'm going to trust the subject matter experts and just cross my fingers, and that's really where I'm at right now. I just, it's a big deal. It's the way of the future, and I think there's marketing that we can be doing. I don't think there's an excuse for we haven't marketed. It's all word of mouth. Everybody has one of these. We have good systems at the city where we can be advertising what we already have for free, like every day, all the time. And I think more people need to know, and we can help get that market share up. And I am a little concerned that market share is so low, but I will support this. And it's going to be hard if you come back asking for more money because we need higher speed. Like, that's my fear.
Councilor Duquesne or Councilor Bloom, did you have anything to add? Your yeses, I understand, on both. Okay, so do you have what you need?
Can I
Chad?
just reconfirm everything, because I won't be here to make sure. The AFN has the guidance to go ahead and proceed with the appropriated amount of $1.6 million to roll out the hybrid expansion program of DOCSIS 3.1 and PON. And then mid-biennially, we'll do a review and assessment, and if a supplemental is needed, we'll come back at that time. But he has the guidance to be able to move forward now. with that.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we move on now to our second agenda item, the East Main Park update.
Good evening. For the record, Rocky Houston, Parks and Recreations Director, City of Ashland. In front of you is a study session item on East Main Park. This is meant to serve as an update. I believe we came here last for the annexation approval. Seems like a couple days ago, but here we are. So just to orientate everyone, back in 2022, this was the approved design charrette in regards to what East Main Park would look like. So starting on the right side of the page, which would be the east, is East Main, with the parking lot coming off of that. To the south is a dog park, little dog and big dog areas. To the north is a pump track and a skills park area. As you come in from the parking lot would be a restroom, playground, nature play area, a sports court, which then would bring you along the trail around the whole meadow area and into the neighborhood off of the Crocker Street area. And then up in that northwest corner is the community garden. As we went through the process, we didn't have a cost estimate when we adopted the design. We didn't get a cost estimate until we were at 90% through the bid package and construction documents. So when we got to that, we identified that we had about $2.5 million budgeted to develop this park, and it was coming in at over $5.5 million to do the whole park. So we had to do what all good bureaucrats have to do, is we had to make lemonade out of that sour budget number. So we decided to phase the project. So phase one was what you see here in white. All the darker areas would not be done. We did this for a couple reasons. One, the requirements of annexation and community development requirements. Number two, we got a $1 million grant to help leverage the funding we did have. And there are requirements. We said we were going to do A, B, and C. And so we had to make sure we did do A, B, C. And that is the pump track is the majority of that grant funding. We have the parking lot, the dog park, the restroom, and a trail connecting to make sure the neighbors from Abbott Street can come down and through into the park. Like many things that happen, we waited a few months before we went out to bid, and when we updated our cost estimate, that $2.5 million for phase one went to $3 million. So we need to revise the project deliverables to keep it within our capital budget while completing the requirements of the grant, or we have to identify additional resources. So some solutions that staff has come up with, and we went out to a public meeting last week to get feedback on, is to reduce the scope, increase the funding, request a code change, and revise the project. All of them have pros and cons, of course. Option one is reduce the scope. So initially when we looked at it, just eliminate $500,000. It's difficult to do because all those elements are in the grant. So if we reduce $1, a lot of times we lose $2 because we lose those grant funding as well. So we looked at the first one was the restroom modifications. So we worked with ComDev to determine that we could still get a building permit if we didn't install the restroom. We just had to make sure that when we completed the project, we had a restroom. So if we removed the restroom, that could save us anywhere from $200,000 to $350,000. However, no one likes porta potties, and it could impact some of the grant funding that we got. So we looked at another option, and we still are, the parking lot modification. So per new state law, we don't have to build a parking lot. In our residential code, in our codes, it is a requirement and something we want to do because we are creating a community park that's an attraction. It's bringing people from broader than just the local quarter-mile radius. This again has somewhere between the $200,000 to $350,000 cost savings. However, it is part of our grant funding, and really we want to make sure we're a good neighbor anytime that we are building a new asset, and so that does limit the accessibility and pushes vehicles and other users out into the neighborhood. So then we looked at increasing funding for the project. So we do have some reserve capital that in the future from our food and beverage fund, or we could remove some projects that we're planning to do this biennium to then make that. Now, the constraint there is, of course, when we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, that's taken away from the future and other deferred maintenance or improvements that we need. There's still the potential that we still have to go out to bid, and we still may need more money than what we have in our current limitation. And while we're looking at another grant program, there are limited grants out there that A, meets our construction timeline, and B, our project would be eligible for. So it comes back to mainly our internal funding options. Of course, through the public process, the idea of I'm going to forget the cool word, but essentially take a loan out on future food and beverage that would allow us to make that whole, and we'd pay back that over time. There's a finance word for it, and I can't remember it, so I apologize, but you know the concept. Good. The last option would be a request code change and revise the project. So I've been in other jurisdictions where you're responsible for the road improvements where you're accessing. Our code is set up to where it's designed can impact the whole parcel and it touching anything else for a good reason, because road improvements are expensive, as I'm finding out, and this, through when you are doing development, it provides that opportunity to bring a complete street up when that development is. So that's where we looked at currently what we found without the code change or a change, we could ask for a variance. However, it would be highly susceptible to a LUBA challenge because it is in our current code. So we would spend money to redo the design. However, because I can cut and paste stuff fairly well some days, we kind of put out here and looked at this idea, which is, as you saw before, let's see if I can get my magic little pointer. The access was over here. We have a small temporary parking lot here for the community center, so instead expanding that out, what that would allow us to do is move our sports court closer to East Main, away from houses, so there would be a net benefit if we had pickleball there or basketball court, that those noises from that use would be farther away from the higher density neighborhood areas. However, we heard clearly last week with the 78 people that were in our meeting that they really liked the design as it was created through that robust process. And so there's still a concern even if we change the code, the time that would take to make that change, still we would have some friction with our neighbors in that prior design. So our next steps is to continue to gather information. We are still receiving some written comments. We'll receive those through the end of the 21st. And then at our study session on the 3rd and our Park Commission business meeting on the 10th, we will make a recommendation for following one of those options that we just outlined or something else based off the information we've gathered. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions you may have.
Councillor Bloom?
Yes, thank you, Rocky. I see an option that's not on here in your last list there, and that is about the variance. So under AMC 18.5.5.050, A, there are 4 qualifications that would allow for a variance, and then under section B, there is another variance option there. Specifically, in granting a variance, the approval authority may impose conditions similar to those provided for conditional uses to protect the best interests of the surrounding property and property owners, the neighborhood, and the city as a whole. I'm wondering if we could explore those options. And I do understand the concern about it being appealed to LUBA, but at the end of the day, this is a uniquely city code, not anything imposed by the state. And as long as it is not, what was the language here, clearly states that this is a result of code language, not city planning decisions. And so that's something that I would like to see us explore and go through that process. It takes less time than changing the code entirely, maybe a month or 2 months to get done. And so I would really like to see that option on the table.
I will follow up with ComDev on that.
Great, thank you.
Great. Councillor Hanson?
Thank you, Rocky. Many of us were at that meeting, what was it, Thursday at the senior center. It was packed. Lots of neighbors, really appreciate all the turnout, a bunch of youth from the bike community. It seemed like there was a lot of people excited about this project and a lot of concerns too. We identified this park years ago because it's the linchpin that holds it all together of the master plan of having a park within a quarter mile of everybody's house within the city of Ashland. So this is the key park that finishes that whole puzzle. And I remember the pump track was an opportunity. We jumped on it. Then interim director Eldridge went after the grant. We got it. Seemed like we were ready to go. At the end of last year. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I am personally extremely disappointed that we didn't start building this thing this year. And I am disappointed in the Parks Department as well as the commission to not get this thing going. We are a city that gets to yes and that gets things done. And this one drug, in my opinion, and now we're having to deal with escalating costs. We're having some hemming and hawing where I think leadership could have pushed this thing. It was green lit. It was ready to go. So to me, this is very frustrating and disappointing. We've been telling these kids for years that they're going to have this pump track. We found funding for it, and now we're here at this point.
Councillor, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. So. I appreciate the interesting ideas, and Councilor Bloom just came out with one. So we asked at the meeting what it might look like to move around some money, whether we're borrowing from future capital projects or whether we're doing a loan for future food and beverages. I know it's only been a couple days, but my first question is, where are you at with that in the last couple of days? Could you give us an update?
Yes, so we've reviewed our current project list and identified some projects that we could pause or take money from that in our current limitation. We've looked at some procurement mechanisms for delivery of the pump track and the restroom to potentially save that 15 to 30% markup that a general contractor would put on it as a way of, again, trying to save some funds. We looked at our system development charges balance above and beyond what we're planning to use this year. And all of those looking to check and double check to see what that total is. And right now it's looking favorable that between those elements within our current limitation, I'm feeling that we could go out to bid and we'd still have a reserve to address any potential leverages. Now, I'm hoping that we have a contractor who's got a very sharp pencil and a very good park heart, that, because we're easy to work with, I'm just selling that to anyone listening out there who's a contractor. So when we do get a quote, it's under what the engineering estimate is, and then that makes everything a lot easier as we're going. However, we have all done capital projects and know that there's change orders and those other elements, and I want to make sure that we've got sufficient funds or paths so that we can deliver on what we put out to bid.
And we're still looking at a delta of about $500,000, correct? Mayor, one more, if I may. I'm surprised you didn't lead with the street frontage. That was a bigger part of your presentation at the senior center. So when this project was developed, as I understand it, we didn't understand that if you annex in county land, you have to do street frontage. And just, if you don't mind, just a quick background on this. East Main is a county road, and that's why it has a different speed limit, you know, in part from other parts of our road system. It also doesn't have sidewalks, and it doesn't have bike lanes, and there are, you know, school children that move around in that neighborhood that potentially could benefit from this street frontage. Also, another thing that could potentially benefit from the street frontage is further development, because other developers have properties along East Main, but incidentally, we've heard like it's too much to take on that, you know, $500,000 burden of, improving a city block. So, you know, theoretically, if we did this, it would bring up the whole neighborhood in many respects. So, to my question, has there, another thing we touched on in the meeting last Thursday, has there been any investigation into separating out the street frontage from this project? Is there a possibility of doing this as an economic development mission more than just part of the capital project of this? Because this investment in that part of town helps the south side in many respects with future development and just safety for the neighborhood. So have you looked into that funding option?
And a little bit. And so to back up, I've updated my presentation here tonight versus what was presented last Thursday based off of the information that I was gathering from ComDev in regards to what I got. It was a very clear message is that we had to do those road improvements. And if I phased them out in the future, I would have to bond to the city for that work to ensure it got done. We have discussed different funding streams. One option was that Public Works came up with is a LID, and I'm not going to get the acronym, but essentially it's a local improvement district. Thank you. That would then allow that to, but then it would impact all of those people along it, and so it has its own limitations, but that would be something that allows us to separate it out. Okay. And so we have looked at those things. As many times I've asked the question, it just appeared that the separating out the road improvements from our phase one just did not appear to be feasible, and that was something that we were going to have to figure out how to do. It has a long-term benefit in regards to improving from Crocker up to Clay and having that connectivity. Now, there's still a gap of County Road until you get up to almost Walker. That is still going to be a gap, but it allows it to make sure that we're not a gap in the future, as well as it ensures that the traffic volume that we may create is not on Abbott, and that was something we heard throughout the meeting and our public comments of a concern of that extra traffic there. As you guys all know, a few months ago, you approved a new development of about 57 houses. That's just another block away from Abbott. That's going to add additional traffic on Clay and additional users to this park. Right. So it's a win, and it's a setback in regards to that extra density. Hopefully I've answered your question.
Yeah, so my question wasn't separating the road improvement from the park in terms of timing. My question was, have you had a chance to look at separating it from a financial bucket standpoint? It sounds like you have. The improvement district is an option, and that's what you're coming forward with. Thank you for that. I mean, you've only had a couple days and there's movement, so I appreciate that.
Councillor Duquesne?
Okay, so many questions, such little time. So, when I attended the meeting on Thursday, and I appreciate all the residents that came and gave feedback, I thought it was a robust meeting. Something that, looking at and kind of touching on what Councilor Hansen had mentioned about the entrance to this park, Abbott, East Main. So when the first plans were drawn up and it was East Main, why didn't we look at that being a county road? I don't understand why that wasn't, before it was even put out there in the plans and rolled out to the commission and the council and the public. Why didn't we look at that entrance coming off of East Main ahead of time?
So, Counselor, I'm confused because we did.
Okay, but then we had to go back and consider Abbott.
Well, we went back
Because
to
of
consider
money.
Abbott as a way to not, so what occurred is the county does not allow access off an arterial. So if it was still county property, we would have to access off of Abbott. So that is county rules. Through the master planning process, identification that the community wanted to access it off of East Main, we went through the annexation process to not only add in the extra 1.5 acres that we acquired that was already in city limits, so we had one parcel, but also to allow us, because the city allows that arterial access. So we went through this process to ensure that we were meeting the community's needs. What we did not do is a cost estimate back then in 2022, 2023 to identify what is that fiscal impact. So we, as a city, and you all through the annexation process, accepted that portion of the county road as a condition of that annexation. And with that, for our road standards is why we're bringing it up to the standard. If we could leave it as is and not have those improvements, then that would be $500,000 to $750,000 in savings or funds that we could put into phase one inside of the park.
So it's my understanding that phase one is 3.3 now. I mean, 3 million now.
You are correct. That is our cost estimate.
And do we know what the total cost is?
No, ma'am. We did not go back to ask for the total project cost estimate update only for phase one.
Okay, so we don't know the total cost estimate, and then we do know that tariffs will be coming soon. I just understand my colleagues' frustration with where we are with it now. And last question really quick is looking at the 57 buildings, units that will be put in place on Clay Street, and then Ingle Street is going to open also, and it would come from the new 57 units that Ingle Street would open, and it crosses Dollarhide and Abbott. So now that the state has allowed that we can have street parking, so we will have parking for the new units, the park, the residents that are already there. Have you done a new traffic impact?
No, ma'am.
No, okay.
Councilor Bloom.
Yes, thank you. Just to kind of follow up on that, and I think I understand where Councilor Duquesne's coming from, and certainly Councilor Hansen as well, is that, look, this started a ways back, and I don't really think that delaying this is what caused the cost to increase. Fundamentally, what it comes down to is that, yes, you came, asked us to annex this, and you had a plan to develop this property. Where it fell through is under 18.5.8.050, Section E, that all adjacent streets under annexation must be improved. And so I'm curious, when was it that you found out about that, and why was that not part of the cost estimate when the original plan came forward to council for annexation?
So when we had a contract that was created before I got here, and the deliverable was not to get a cost estimate until we were at 100% design. I modified that contract at the 90%, so we got numbers as early as we could. When I arrived, we were at about 60% design, and so that's the next step, 60% plans. Sometimes you get a 75%, 90%. So that, as soon as we got the number, that's when we started to identify. In a perfect world, and I don't live in one, we would have got a cost estimate back when we got the master plan. We would have got a cost estimate at 10% and been able to make adjustments much earlier in the process. However, and it's my fault, I delayed the construction and going out to bid because I wanted to ensure that we had funding for the operation of it, and we were going through that dialogue, and so that's where we've lost a couple months. And through that process, I asked for an update because we had sufficient time, and that's where we got the bad news. So that's the timing of what we're facing here.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Yeah, quick follow-up. And I understand, and I, you know, honestly, the delay, and I think it's great that you were like trying to understand the operational costs. That's not the concern I have, and not quite the question that I had. The question that I had is, where did this section E under 18.5 fall through? Was that because of a predecessor didn't include it in the plan? Like, why was it that this wasn't considered when developing the cost estimate?
It was in the cost estimate.
For
When I got the
improvements to have it?
90% cost estimate, the road improvements were there. We were
For Abbott.
not for Abbott.
That's my
for
concern.
East Main.
For East.
So, sorry, we approached the concept of we could redo design, change the design elements to save the East Main costs. That's when we went to ComDev and determined that does not appear to be a mechanism in the short term to do that. So the changing of the parking lot, we never went to get it designed in those elements because I didn't want to spend good money if it didn't appear that that was going to be the right decision for the community.
Thank you. We are at 7 o'clock. We need a motion to extend and a vote. Councilor Dale.
Sure, Mayor, I'd like to motion to extend by 30 minutes.
Is there a second? Okay. Roll call, please. Or can I just do an all in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will carry on. We have several people who have signed up to speak with us this evening, so I'd like to handle the public testimony at this point, and then we'll go back to questions from staff. So 4 people have signed up. Each person will have up to 3 minutes, but you don't have to spend your whole 3 minutes if you don't want to. The way that you will do this is going up to that microphone. You'll see a color display that helps you stay on track and know where you're at in terms of your timing. When you get to 20 seconds before the end of your timing, you'll hear a buzz, a chime, and you'll also see that your light goes to yellow. That gives you the indication that you're coming to the end of your time. When your light turns red on that display, you'll hear another chime, and at that point, please finish the sentence that you're on. The 4 people who have signed up to speak this evening are Mary Ann Shank, Belle Borg, Mike Gardner, and Janet Bell. Please come forward in that order. So starting with Mary Ann Shank. Yep, at that microphone. And the people who are going to speak behind her, feel free to come up and line up along the wall behind her if you'd like.
Okay,
Go
good.
ahead.
Thank you.
And
I
please tell us
appreciate
your name and the city in which you reside to start.
I'm Mary Ann Shank. I reside in Ashland on Clay Street. I am one of the neighbors. And I've got to clarify one issue that's been brought up. And thank you for being at the meeting last night, those of you who were there. It was packed, but not with neighbors. It was packed with people from the club that has the mountain biking project. Sadly, I was late. I was only there a half hour. They were into questions. I raised my hand for a question. I raised my hand for a question. I raised my hand for a question. I never got called on. The only people who got called on were those who were members of the biking community. It was not a fair representation of what the community feels. Tonight I'm hearing good concerns from all of you, and I appreciate it, things that I can't know. And that's been my biggest problem. I've been trying desperately to get more information on this. There's nothing on the website. There are no maps. There's no information about these grants. I don't know where they're coming from or what they entail or what the restrictions are. There's just nothing I can find out. I feel like I'm being blocked out and pushed into something that I don't know. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling. I do care about our community, and anything I say, please don't take this as any criticism of the biking group. I've looked at their website and I like them a lot. They do great things with kids. They really teach kids to be outdoors people and leaders. I respect what they're doing. My question is whether or not this is the place where they should be doing it. First, you mentioned, I believe, Mayor, that we want a park within a quarter mile of every house. If this bike path is put in, this bike course, it will not be a neighborhood park. It won't be safe for the young children in the neighborhood to go there. Who could slip into that? Who could chase a little dog into that? It's just too wide open. Children can be hurt. I, as an old person, if I saw a biker coming toward me, and not necessarily one in the club, but just a biker coming toward me, I'm not agile enough to get out of the way anymore. I'm an old person. That community has a lot of older people and younger people. We have to respect that. Also, the insurance on an ongoing basis. I could find no information on that. I really implore you that if this is going to be a financial burden on the city, set it aside.
Thank you. Belle Borg, followed by Mike Gardner and Janet Bell.
Hi there, my name is Belle Borg, and I live on Abbott Avenue, right across the street from the lot that is going to be the park. And I attended the meeting on the 14th, and this is the letter that I sent to Mr. Houston, and I thought I would just read it really quick. Neither options are good ones. I prefer the original concept that took 2 years plus to be finalized. A lot of thought went into those plans for a beautiful park that would address everyone's needs. I understand the use it or lose it need to spend the $1 million grant money before its expiration date. However, it was pretty clear to me that this was a final hour push to do just that, so as to make sure the pump track was in place. There was lots of talk about the other additions to the park down the road, but no real budgeting process was offered to make sure that happens. My grave concern is that we're going to have a 6-acre park with only a pump track and a parking lot location that makes no sense, specifically right in front of Abbott. The loan of F&B monies was mentioned, but no clear explanation of how that loan was to be repaid. I'm not a finance person, but would this mean added fees, another financial burden to carry by those of us who live on a limited income? Safety was discussed that night as well. Lowering the speed limit on East Main to 25 miles an hour is the only thing that makes sense for an easy turn into the park. But moving the entrance to Abbott Avenue makes no sense and would change the current neighborhood vibe, where children currently can ride their bikes, walk, run, play without worrying about heavy traffic. Ashland is on a limited budget, as am I and most of my neighbors. When I really want something, I budget to make it happen. I suggest Ashland and the Parks and Rec do the same and put off this park until you can do it properly, starting with the proper infrastructure. Thank you. Also, very quick, because I have a green light, thank you to Mr. Bloom, who on the weekend parked in front of my house. Little did he know. I did not speak to him. He whipped out a ruler. He parked his car, got a measuring tape, and measured from the end of the curb to the width of his car, and I just want to thank him for being proactive in due diligence. It was refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Gardner?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to pass. I don't think I have anything beneficial to add.
Okay. Janet Bell?
Well, I wasn't prepared to come and speak, but here I am. I live also in that neighborhood off of Clay, And what ensued, I wasn't at the meeting at the senior center, but what ensued was a great cross communication and inside the living organization that I'm in the Wingspread Mobile Home Park. And really just people coming forward with it. What I'd like to actually have seen is where this park sits in community in that whole area of South Ashland. Because, you know, it's just it's 6 acres amidst many acres of many homes, many people. And one of our big concerns is no access, no easy way to get out in case of fire. So here we are in a community that is concerned about fire, and we look at it, the map from the top down. And so I just really invite in this whole process, and I know that people were excited about East Main for pickleball because the pickleball courts are so crowded over in Lithia Park, and it was going to be, oh, in East Main there's going to be a pickleball court. But that doesn't seem to be the community that's being served here. And I guess I just wonder, what is the percentage of the community being served in this, with the pump track? I mean, this is, yeah, I understand. There's people that love to do that. There's people that love to ski and snowboard and this and that. But what are we talking about? In one of the communications in the park, someone came forward that this park was really designed to attract all of Jackson County and from all points that they would come to this park in order to have this pump track. Well, that's a different consideration than that this is an Ashland City Park. And I just sort of invite that I was thinking, gee, it would be great to see what shows up in terms of noise and input at a pump track, since I've never seen one and don't know what that is. But I just feel that there's something about, this is not a neighborhood park. This is not a kind of, okay, the kids can just go on and do their little Garfield Park thing and a pond. This is a serious enterprise, as you know, has been spoken. You've been waiting for this, Mr. Hansen, for a long time. And it's like, okay, but who is it serving? And as you expand more and more developments in that area, that has to be a question. How is it serving? And certainly not parking off Abbott. I drove down it yesterday just to see what was that. I mean, we're just talking parking congestion, and we've upped the ante in our homes. And so I just really invite just deep consideration of all these different aspects of, does this actually enhance this part of Southern Ashland? Thank you.
Thank you. So this evening, the council is simply getting an update. We are going to be hearing from the commission after they take in this public input, and they'll be coming forward to the council with a plan. Am I understanding that correct? So we do have some time for some follow-up questions. I have a couple, but I wanted to give you the floor, Rocky, because we had some of our residents bring up certain concerns. Is there anything that you would want to put out into the conversation?
Well, I would say that there were a significant number of the population of the meeting were from Ashland in that neighborhood. And our comments are coming primarily from those neighbors. So on one wall, there were Devo members, I think 4 of them, if I remember correctly. I'm sure there was more throughout the crowd. So I think it was a fair representation of people who are going to use this property, this park, and people who are next to it. The percentage of the community that the pump track or trails serves. So it's a tough question to answer in regards to a specific asset. What I can say is in our survey data that we gathered in the spring, looking at what do people want and do here in Ashland, trails was the number 1 thing. Whether it's walking, biking, trails was our number 1 activity that people utilize our parks for. The community members are correct. This is not a neighborhood park. It's a community park. A community park is designed to bring people, meet the local needs within that quarter mile, as well as usually have a 3-mile radius service where we're bringing people in vehicles and on bicycles to come to it. Just like Garfield's a community park. We have a splash pad there. It's the only one we have in the city, and it not only serves those that are right next to it, but it's a draw from all over the community. Similar sort of setup and style where we have smaller parking there than we do here. Uh-oh. And
What it,
Oh, sorry, it's emergency alert, Siskiyou County or something, so I'll find out what it is.
thank you.
And I just want to appreciate everyone that came tonight and everyone who has been providing feedback, because all that information is helping staff collect that and come up with solutions for our park commissioners.
Great, thank you. I think it can be easy in hindsight to look back at a process and have criticisms, and sometimes I think those are warranted and they're opportunities for us to learn going forward. But I think it's also true that there is an incredible amount of uncertainty. And what I've seen in the last probably 4 years, certainly since COVID hit, is that price escalations are incredibly difficult to predict at this point. And they go up and then they come back down, and now we don't know about tariffs. And there's, it is very difficult to predict what something will cost right in front of us, let alone what it might cost if it's a phase 3, 10 years down the road. So I think I would encourage us to look at this situation and see what we might learn, and I'm sure the Parks Commission is doing that as well, but also to allow some grace for the reality in which these systems are trying to, we're trying to improve elements of our community. The question that I have is, you had mentioned that the bathrooms, there's a question about, do you bring the bathrooms in early or not? Or in that early phase. I know one of the things that we've been experiencing with some of our bathrooms in other parts of town is that there's vandalism, there are heavy maintenance costs, those sorts of things. Have we considered something like the Portland Loo, the sort of the indestructible bathroom, as a potential for that site?
We did look at it and cost it. I want to say the cost estimate was closer to $500,000 versus about $176,000 for the CXT model we're looking at. Plus, there's the underground infrastructure and those things. So it was something we looked at. We looked at the one that's in Medford, I think is the closest one that's been installed. The self-cleaning element is nice, but it was a capital budget element. So we also looked at a couple other manufacturers as well that are nicer looking, fit finish better versus a precast concrete one as well.
Okay. Are there any final questions? Councilor Bloom.
2 quick ones, Rocky, and then I'll lay off you for a little bit. One, this was kind of a 2-part question. One, if let's say the variance option was what Parks decided they wanted to go with, and that went through, without having to do the street improvements to Abbott and stick with the original plan of just East Main, would you come in on budget?
So if we kept the parking lot where it was but didn't do the street improvements, yes, I believe that would save us somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000. So our current budget appears to be sufficient.
Thank you. And then part 2 of the question, the second part of the question, is if there was a decision made and Parks and Council would have to agree to this, to borrow against F&B funds, which first of all, we have to find out if it's even legal to be able to do that. That means that you would be foregoing, Parks would be foregoing future capital funds from F&B. Would that limit your ability to move forward with future phases and further set this project back?
Great question. First, I think within our reserve and the projects that we could remove in the current biennium, we wouldn't have to borrow. That borrowing has been done in the past. So for Briscoe and for Garfield, those are 2 things that we're actually paying off this year. But you're right. If we are, just like getting a car or a mortgage, you are setting up, it would reduce our ability for future projects, and that's something we're always balancing.
Rocky, I really appreciate you coming and taking these tough questions, especially for me. I know I've been kind of hard on you and on Thursday as well. I want you to know I support this park. My concerns lie with Abbott and the traffic around that and making sure that we stay on budget. But I want you to know that I do support your efforts to get this park built.
Councilor Duquesne?
Mayor. So if I heard you correctly, Mr. Houston, you have borrowed against the 23% F&B. Is that what you alluded to?
23% F&B.
Your 25% of food and beverage you've borrowed against it
sorry,
before for Briscoe or?
My understanding is that there's, and I don't know the right financial term,
Bonding.
bonding, that
Okay.
we have done that in the past. And we are finishing payments on I think it was a 2015, 2016 update to Garfield. And I'm not sure exactly when we acquired Briscoe, but I know that the parks bought the western portion of Old Briscoe School. And those were two ways that we used it.
Quick question. Thank you. And last question is that you mentioned earlier that you would look at, it was in your slide, goodness, cutting down, slowing the progress of some things to get this done. And you said that you could slow down the progress of some things and perhaps even stall them. When you come back, can you let us know what that would be, what they are? What would you stop? What would you cut? Do you
Yes,
know?
we're preparing that information right now as one of the alternatives for the Park Commission. And so when they make a decision, they'll have that full information, understanding what projects we would not be doing this biennium or only doing a portion of to keep it within budget.
That would be interesting to see. Thank you.
Councilor Hanson?
Thank you, Rocky. One last question for me. In terms of the state grant funding, so the pump track was funded by a state grant fund, and we have an open window that closes, I believe, next year. Could you tell us what date that is?
I can give you an approximation.
That's close enough for now.
Yeah, so I believe we have until January of 2027 for the first original 24 months, and we can get a 6-month extension to kick that out probably till July 1 of 2027.
Okay. And I saw some literature out that said if this was to move forward in the current thinking, it would be like a January 2026 project. Is that still what your hopes and desires are?
Yes,
or did I get
working.
It wrong?
It depends. Sorry for the answer. So if the direction is let's do exactly what we have planned, our bid package, and go out. If we get that direction in early September, we would start the bidding process. That takes usually 3 to 4 months for a let or ability to go out to construction in that first quarter of 2026. If the process requires us to do some additional work, time for planning, permitting, design, variance, then we'd have to add that into it, and so that may delay us getting the package out. Now, there is a potential where we could make some assumptions, which is it's a risky thing to do, and try to do the bidding process in parallel with a variance or something like that. The risk is potentially the contractor increases their price, or there's something in there that we have to modify while it's out to bid, but that would be something we'd be exploring as well.
We want to get it fully baked. I understand. But just to remind you, you were here in this room last year and you told us that we're going to be building this Q1 of this year. So let's get it done.
Councilor Kaplan?
Just say thanks, Rocky, for the update, and I look forward to hearing the decisions of the commissioners and Parks Department.
Yeah, and I'm hoping we can find a solid solution. I know that there are some concerns, but there's also a lot of excitement about this park. And so I believe there's an optimal path, and I know that there's a lot of hard work going into finding what that path is. And I look forward to seeing what the commission comes forward with in terms of a solution. So thank you so much for your presentation and answering the question, and for the public engagement process around this. It's a complicated question, and I know a lot of people are trying to trying to figure out what are the different elements that are being considered. And it's not always an easy process, but it's a really important one. And so thank you for taking the time and putting the energy into that process. And with that, meeting is adjourned.